Welcome to Season 6 of Far Reach Voyages, where we share our love of offshore sailing and adventure travel. In the last episode, I demonstrated how I installed backing plates in the mast, demonstrated how I used taps to cut threads for machine screws, and described key considerations when ordering pop rivets. In this final episode, I'll perform turnbuckle maintenance, cut bolts to custom length, complete installing the mast hardware, including the trysail track, and finally, conclude the mast rebuild series by restepping the mast. Whenever you cut a bolt off, you always want to put a nut on first. That way you can clean the threads up by moving the nut off the bolt after you cut it. And usually that'll work. But sometimes you get one that's got a little burr on it. And if you do, you use a die. The taps are the long ones that cut threads in the material. And this is a tap for a 1024, quarter 20, which is what this is. And you'll see one end is wider than the other, so you start from this end. And then you just stick it in here. And then you just put it in there, and that will find those threads. And all it does is it just cleans those threads out. It's called chasing the threads. That should go right in there. There you go. This is Citrus 77. I use this for cleaning metal after I've worked on it. Or if it's got a little bit of rust on it and I remove fasteners, I can toss it in a little bath of this. It works great, and I just reuse it. I don't throw it out. I just pour it back in there. So since I cut on these fasteners, let them soak in there for about 30 minutes. And that passivates the metal. Finally, time to install the gooseneck, which I had to install before I can install the trysail track. So we've used this UHMW tape that's adhesive on one side. I covered it in the last video. I had sawn there, and you can cut these things out with a razor knife. It's tricky. I found this works pretty good. Just kind of the first 4 feet, this trysail track is installed with 1024 fasteners, and that is so if I need to pull the gooseneck off for any reason. There's a riser pad in there, that ramp goes up over the gooseneck. Don't normally screw the trysail track on, because, well, pop rivets are very strong, but more importantly, they're easy to drill out. So if they get corroded, you can drill them out. Fasteners, if they get corroded, you've got a whole different kind of problem on your hands. So Tef gel helps a lot. All of these came out without any difficulty 9 years after launching the boat. that speaks well for the Tef Gel. I had only a couple of fasteners that were sticky, and they were the Winch base fasteners, 1/4 20s. And I had to use a hammer impact driver to get them out. It was touch and go, but they all came out. Something else to think about. These are both 3/16" thickness stainless steel pop rivets. But look at the difference in the gripping range. So when you order these, you have to account for the gripping range. How much material are you pop riveting through? This is pretty thick. This is probably for, I don't know, 1/2 inch or maybe even 3/4 of an inch thick of material. And sometimes they'll have different ranges. So when you order them, it'll say 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch or 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch or whatever. What I'm pop riveting right now is the thinner staysail track to the relatively thin sidewalls of the spar. So I'm using these smaller pop rivets. It's just something else that you have to think about when you order them. These turnbuckles have been on the boat about, I guess, 9 years. But I lubricated them before with anhydrous lanolin, I think. I don't think it's that great for it. It's dry and it doesn't attract a lot of dirt, but it's not very lubricative. So I'm not going to do it again. I'm going to use a little more winch grease, I think. So we will take them apart and then clean them in some kerosene. The red tape that's on here, I used to mark where the rigging was tensioned before I took the mast down. It's sort of an attempt to speed reassembly. I don't know that it's really necessary. I use a loose gauge, and I know what the settings are for my rig, but I thought I would try this as an experiment. You can see that this lanolin does allow the rig to be turned, but boy, it's really dried out. So stainless rigging screws and bronze bodies. You do not want stainless steel bodies and stainless steel rigging screws because you have a high chance of galling, and they'll just lock up and you're not getting them off. Bronze on bronze is best, very expensive, hard to come by these days. Stainless steel on bronze is next best thing. Now here's one of the turnbuckles that I had lubricated with some grease. It's the port cap shroud. I probably was adjusting it and struggling with the lanolin, and I applied some grease on it, and you can just tell the difference after years. They're still able to turn pretty easily, so that's just another indicator. This is a all-purpose brush, GP brush, general purpose brush that comes in military cleaning gear for your rifle. What I like about it is the bristles hold up to the solvents we use for cleaning weapons. If you use a regular toothbrush, old toothbrush, a lot of times the bristles will just disintegrate on you from the reaction to the solvents. Then what I like to do is, you can see how you get this rust. I'll let it sit in here. This is this Magica. I've had really good luck with this over the years on stainless. I just brush it on there and let it sit for about 15 minutes. Here's one, that was just like that. You can see it's all clean now. I've shared before about using this UHMW tape. I use these bronze winches. This is my staysail halyard winch, and it goes on an aluminum winch pad that's bolted to the mast. and you don't want to put bronze on aluminum, even if there's paint between them. I wouldn't. And then you can see this is UHMW tape that's on there, so that the bronze never comes in physical contact with the aluminum, even if the paint were to fail. All right, so this is the staysail winch. It's a bronze Lumar number 8. If you look inside, you'll see those springs and pawls on the bottom. Just a quick note in case anyone's unsure about it. You put grease only on the bearings and on the drive axle and the gears. You never put grease on the springs and paws. They only get a light coating of oil. I like to use sewing machine oil. Double row of bearings, and then down at the top where my finger is another set of pawls. These pawls sometimes hang up on these teeth. I have a little tool I use. I'll show you. I just slide this on there. So you can see how these teeth, they're not what's hanging it up. It's underneath, right up in there. So I have this little epoxy knife that I use, and I just sort of trip these. Do this right. Gonna turn them a little bit. There you go. Saw it here first. Far reach voyages. This goes on top, and then a circle clip. I just replace these. These are new. They do wear out every once in a while. You can usually bend them back into shape. But I had a winch, actually the reefing winch on the boom, pop off in my hand once, and the circle clip wasn't properly secured. There we go. The bolts for these new winch pads I made for the main halyard winch and the jib halyard winch are a little long. So I got to cut a 1/4 inch off. I forgot my gloves, forgot my face shield. I need to be very careful. PVC pipe helps me steady this thing. Anytime you touch this metal with a steel file, you contaminate it with steel, and it's stainless, and it will rust. And what you do, if you cool it off, is you put it in that Citrus 77 Plus solution I mentioned earlier, and it helps pacify it. And by the time I'm finished with these, they'll be ready to go. I've mentioned in other videos how I use Dolphinite sometime, which is sort of a traditional bedding compound. And it doesn't ever really get hard. So if you're going to disassemble something, this works really well. I bought a quart a long time ago, and I decanted it into 2 smaller pint-sized cans. You can see the lot number on here that I wrote down. 26 April. It was opened on 26 April. It looks like 18 right there. So that's been 6 years. And you can see that it's still soft in there. All I did was peel off a little skim layer about 1/8 of an inch deep. So it's still in great shape 6 years later. Can't do that with 3M 4000 or even Sikaflex 291. So it's just another tool when you know you're going to take something apart. Winch base, this is the jib winch. It's bedded now with Dolphinite, and as I mentioned earlier, Dolphinite's not the best tool for everything. Things aren't going to be taken apart for a long time. Things for which you might want a little bit of adhesive quality in your caulking. But for bedding, on things that you think you might remove, like these winch pads. These are teak that I painted white. They'll need to come off ever so often for painting. Dolphinite just makes it a lot easier to take it apart. And the other thing is, you can carry a small can of Dolphinite on your boat. You can carry it for years and it'll still be pliable and usable, whereas tube of caulking sometimes dries out after a year and you haven't even opened it. Here's another thing to keep in mind. This is the bottom end of the mast is going this way. This faces down when the mast is stepped. And these winches almost always have a drain hole. You can see it right there. When you orient this base, position it on your mast, or even on a combing if it's angled down, it's not perfectly level. You always want to try to get that drain hole down so any water that gets in there can find its way out. Time to attach the standing rigging. The mast is all put back together, ready to be stepped tomorrow. Very pleased with how the paint came out. Doubling plates to strengthen the mast, belaying pin rack, winches. These are the riser blocks I added to the jib and the main halyards to give us a more fair lead for the halyards. Whisker pole track, same as before. I took all the shrouds, swapped them end for end. So you can see these are the ends that were down, now they're up. Swapped the old Nylock aircraft nylon locking nuts for castle nuts. I think this is a more secure system. Whisker pole uphaul downhaul. Here's a new steaming light, which I didn't need before because I didn't have an engine. This is the pad eye for the lazy jacks. Pole topping lift. Staysail halyard. The forestay for the staysail. You need to rig that. That's ducks. Dynex ducks from Caligo. Same one I've been using. It's 10 years old. Jib halyard diverter, which we added in St. Martin in 2016. Masthead, no electronics up here, no wiring in the mast at all, except for the steaming light, which I added. And there's that PVC conduit I put down inside it. The spar is built to accept, so that the wire stays isolated from the halyards. In the next episode of Far Reach Voyages, I'll share how I fabricated a new boom for the Far Reach. I'll explain how I installed reinforcing bars, dramatically increasing its strength. We'll fabricate some new hardware, and you'll see a step-by-step demonstration of how you properly prepare aluminum for painting, as well as how you brush and tip Awlgrip to give a finish indistinguishable from spraying that you can do yourself. If you enjoyed this episode of Far Reach Voyages, let us know in the comments. Also, consider liking and subscribing, as it tells us you'd like to see more videos and it helps the channel grow. See you in the next episode.